Hey Gary, how are you?
Hey Jen, how are you? I'm fine. It's a beautiful day here, so I'm just smiling.
Yes. Oh, I know it's always nice when it's a beautiful day weather-wise, especially in New England in the fall,
Yeah,
and B when you're launching your book. So we have double reasons to be excited today.
right, right. Thank you.
Yeah, so for those who are either watching us live or you're watching this after the fact, I am Jen Grace and I'm the founder of Publisher Purpose. And we are here today for another launch conversation. And today we are launching Gary Holmes' book, which is a memoir of Fortunate One from Nantucket to the White House. So Gary, there's 9,000 different questions I could possibly ask you, and it's a memoir and it's a big one. So, can you just do a high level, if possible, kind of what your book is about?
Well, the subtitle pretty much sums it up. This book is about the first half of my life. I was born on Nantucket. I grew up in a working class industrial town. Went to college, moved back to Nantucket to work at the local newspaper. Then I moved to Washington, D.C., and worked in Washington during the 80s, during the Reagan administration. And the memoir ends when I moved to New York and started a different career as a public relations consultant. That's pretty much when my life kind of breaks in two, because it was, the first half of my life was that's covered in here is like more or less formative years, even though it goes up to when I was 34.
Mhm.
Um, and also that's when I met my wife, and so that seemed like a natural breaking point. So, as I
Mhm.
said, it covers my experiences in Nantucket. It covers my experiences growing up, and it covers my experiences, working in the White House, working in Washington, and working on the political campaigns.
Hmm, it's so good. So there we go. Like, I'm sorry, I'm making people nauseous with the bouncing between video views. Trying trying to get us back. So, okay, yeah. So there's obviously there's a lot that went into this. So I'm curious because in the grand scheme of timelines, I feel like it did not take you that long to move through this entire process. Like it really, and maybe you disagree, but on my side, I feel like it didn't take you that long. What, when you went into this, like, okay, I'll start with the first question of like, how did you get this done? Like, what was your process? Like, what did it look like actually sitting down and making the time to get this written?
I don't know what a natural process is, because I haven't been a professional author before. It's from it from it took me about 2 years to do. Uh, I am an incredible pack rat, which is a problem for my wife, who is not. Um, and I have collected throughout my entire life letters, and I started keeping a diary about 25 years ago. So the process started with me going back and reading all these letters that I received or sent as a child, as a teenager, in college, um, and then also rereading the diaries to make sure that my memory was correct. And the diaries helped me find a lot of details, and that the broad strokes of what I remembered was correct. But you just sort of, you can't remember all those details, and that helped a lot. So I started writing 2 summers ago, and it was slow at first. It takes a while to find your voice. What I would do is, every time I wrote a chapter, I would and went back to the chapter to write another paragraph. I'd start from the beginning
Mhm.
and edit it all the way down. So this went on for quite a while, but that's how I got started. And then I connected with you. I don't know, maybe it was about a year ago. I At that point, I had probably written about 2/3 of the book.
Mhm.
Um, so Maybe that's why it didn't seem as long to you, because many of the chapters were already
Mhm.
in the can by then.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so what has been, because it just your book just came out. Like
Yeah.
it's so like hot off the press type of just came out. Have you had conversations with people who, in your life who did did you warn people in advance that you were doing this, or has it come by surprise to others? And I say warn, and you're not writing anything like salacious, but like, and generally speaking, when people write memoirs, there can be a lot of emotional baggage that kind of goes into the fact that you are writing about people that are around you in your life. So what's been the reaction so far?
Well, the question about whether I warned people is that I did. I showed, I either showed them or offered to show them chapters in which they were mentioned, because this is not really, I do tell a lot, but it's not really a tell all. I tell more about myself really than I tell about other people.
Mhm.
Um, I so it is not it was not a major surprise to any of the principals who are, still alive. The part of the issue is that many of the people that I'm writing about are now have died,
Mhm.
because this is stuff that happened more than 35 years ago, sometimes 60 years ago. So,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, and the reaction has been pretty positive. There are a handful of people that are mentioned extensively in the book who have uh, responded very positively. My two oldest friends from elementary school and from college, I actually showed them all the chapters as I was writing them, and they helped me a lot by either reminding me of things, or, they were my first editors. I showed it to my mother because she's the person in particular that I didn't want to, have her feel that she was being blindsided, and she was very positive with it. I think she was, kind of proud that I'd written about her, and to some extent, it's kind of a little bit of her memoir too, because so much of my early life is her story.
Mhm.
And then my boss in Washington, I did not show it to him, but he did read it, and he said, I think he was also flattered to be included. And his memory was about what happened in those days wasn't as good as mine. So he was, I think for him it was a good opportunity to be reminded of the work we'd done together in Washington.
Yeah, that's interesting. And did your time in Washington end around age 35? Is that why you have the cutoff where you have it?
What happened? The cutoff comes because um, the age 35 is exactly half of my life. I'm not 70 yet, but it's I'm what am I 67? So it really ended up, it was 34. So chronologically half my life, but the other reason is because it's as I said, when I met my wife,
Mhm.
and we moved to New York, and this sort of period of searching that occurred during those first 34 years when I was trying to establish myself professionally, trying to get my personal life in order, um, and and the whole story about the Washington story was as an end. It was the end of the Reagan administration. I worked in the Reagan administration, and when that was over, I didn't want to stick around and be a political hack in Washington. I wanted to try something different, and that's when I moved to New York.
Hmm. And I know this isn't covered in the book necessarily, but what so you obviously left the White House and left the kind of that political arena and then came back north to New York. What like do you see yourself having other books in the future? And something I just want to note is this is what a memoir should be. A lot of times people confuse autobiographies with memoirs. And so memoirs are a snapshot of time and you chose it for that snapshot to be half your life, not the entirety of your life. So I'm curious if there's, other things brewing in you now that you've written about some of yourself?
I am definitely considering writing the sequel. It would be somewhat, um, it would be cover that. What I was trying to do is paint a picture of what life was like during that time, partly for my son's purposes, because now I don't ever have to tell him again. In my day, it was like this because all he needs to do is read it,
Mhm.
and that's covered. But I was hoping to sort of prick people's minds and memories, like, oh yeah, that's what happened to me too. Those of us who grew up in the '60s, had a very similar experience because it was kind of a monoculture back then, and we all kind of lived through the same thing. Um, but at the same time, I was trying to show what it was like what it was like to work in Washington, what it was like to live on Nantucket in the '70s. So if I write the second book, it would be what it was like being a public relations consultant in the '90s and the 2000s. What it was like to to raise a child in Connecticut suburbs. So I think I might have another book in me. But I kind of, to some extent, it'll depend on what the reception is to this book, and I assume that the writing will come easier. The research might be a little longer because these diaries are hard to. They take a long time to read these diaries. I mean, it's like a
Yeah.
very, um, I went into when I would sit down every night and write what happened during the day, I'd include a lot of detail. So it's
Mhm.
the hardest part is deciding what to keep and what not to keep, and what to. I mean, it hurt my, it hurt my heart to leave out a lot of stories and a lot of people that were important.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, and obviously you can't really speak from the opposite side of this, but most people are not using a diary, like a really detailed diary. Sometimes they have like a letter from somewhere at some point that might add a little piece of something, but they're not kind of looking at the totality of their lives, I think, in the way that you were able to. Do you think that that made it more challenging because you did have to kind of sit and relive and go through things that you had written in real time versus having to just recall it purely from memory?
Well, I have to say that it was emotionally more challenging because when I was going through the diary, and also going through the letters, letters that my girlfriend had sent me in college, letters that my best friends had sent me in college. It was like reliving, and then the diary is even more so. It was like reliving that experience all over again. And I was reminded that we sometimes look back on the past and with rose-colored glasses. Oh, those were great days, and some things about those days were great, but there was a lot of emotional turmoil, and
Mhm.
um, living through it again was it was a very vivid experience to uh, to go through that. So when I was recapturing um, you know, those, those experiences, it was challenging.
Mhm.
I guess I kept on feeling like I was, 15 again or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, because 'cause you're, like, truly reliving it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is so interesting because yeah, a lot of times with memoirs, we're doing the best that we can to remember accurately. However, it is known that our memories are flawed,
Right.
and so it's always nice to work on something where you actually have records that you can go back to and like really make something factually accurate. Because a lot of memoirs, there's just a lot of kind of grace that memoirs are provided because of the faulty memory alone.
Well, the other thing that I had going for me is that I had friends who had lived through the same experiences. So I was able to show them the chapters and say, is this how you remembered it? Like, did you really come into my dorm room that time, and did this really happen? And they did confirm. So and some of the high school things. I have high school friends, and I showed it to them, to my high school friends, and they were able to confirm. So that helped a lot. But having accumulated all these boxes of school papers and report cards and all that, and date books, it did help a lot to. I felt uh, fairly confident that I wasn't that there was a fair amount of accuracy in it, and
Mhm.
yeah, so it was very comforting, especially when I got to the part where I had started actually writing the diaries, um, to know that at least I've got it down. I mean, if I don't think I lied to my diary,
Yeah.
um, and you know, at least the this thing happened. My perspective on it might be my own, and I may have a wrong perspective, but at least factually, this person said this thing, and I recorded it.
Hmm. Did you find moments where there was incongruency between what you thought you remembered versus what it actually said?
Yeah, there were times where I couldn't remember the exact sequences, like when I was job hunting in Washington. Because one of the things that happens in Washington is like you keep on changing jobs, and a lot of times, your job ends and you have to find another job. So there was I there were times where I couldn't remember, like, was it the guy at the Justice Department that said this, or was it the guy in the vice president's office that offered me the job? And what were their names? And um, I was there were the chronology was sometimes mixed up a little bit. The overall story was the same,
Hmm.
but I guess am surprised that my memory was as good as it was. I was relieved that it was, because I was able to verify what happened in Washington as being consistent with my memory. I was confident that what had happened in, when I was living on Nantucket, or when I was
Hmm.
growing up, was probably, within the realm of reality.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just so awesome to kind of have that backdrop to be able to kind of rely on. So I want to ask you about the title and the subtitle. So the subtitle, I feel like it's a from to a to type of
Yeah.
subtitles are always great, right? So that's the obvious thing. But what was your? Did you know what you wanted your title to be before you had written this? Did it just hit you one day? Like, what was your process for figuring out your title?
Yeah, the title was actually the most difficult thing to write. As I say in my introduction, it was easier to write 100,000 words than it was to write two,
Mhm.
um, because I didn't really know what the title was going to be until the whole thing was over. And the title is based. I really, one of my friends, he one of, one of my friends suggested I call it "Fortunate Son," but we realized that was the name of a John Fogerty song, so we didn't want to use that. But so we ended up with "Fortunate One." The title is based on the realization that I made throughout um, uh, my life, is just how lucky I've been, to be born when I was born, to be born to my particular parents, and in a you know middle class time. My health was good, but also I was fortunate. Even the bad things that happened to me, that seemed bad at the time, if I lost a job, or if a girlfriend broke up with me, or whatever. Um, it was fortunate because it led me to, where I am at the end of the book, which is, about to get married to my wife,
Mhm.
and about to, which will lead to me having my son. And so I feel very lucky. And it was when I was, this is one thing that I recalled, when I know what the end is, but I've forgotten some of the twists and turns along the way. Like there was a time when I was up for two jobs, one of which would have had me move to California, another which is the one I actually took and stayed in Washington. The fact that like the one job offer, the job to California offer was delayed unexpectedly. And in the meantime, I got this other offer to stay in Washington. Like that was an incredibly lucky break because I was already convinced I was going to move away. And, if I'd moved to California, my life would have been entirely different.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. Do you remember that movie Sliding Doors with
Yes,
Gwyneth
yes,
Paltrow?
yes. I was going to, it's funny. I was going to mention that to you. There's, like one slide every day is like, when I'm reading my diaries, I realize that every day is a sliding door.
Hmm.
I either go this way or that way,
Hmm.
and I really do not want to take, I, I don't want to go back and say, geez, I wish this particular thing had happened to me because you never know where
Hmm.
it would have ended up. And
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for what my life I have now. And I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to take a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's such a good movie because, at the end of the day, regardless of the path you take, you still kind of end up in the same place. That's always kind of interesting too. It's just the journey, right?
Right.
Every day is a different journey. So, as we're kind of nearing the end, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you might want to mention or bring up before I kind of share how people can get your book?
No, I mean, well, the only thing I do want to mention is I am grateful to you and your team for helping me navigate the process as a first time author. I did not, I had no idea how to get the thing published. And, you and your team were really, really helpful in helping me figure out how to get, there's a lot more to it than, you'd expect. And, everything from finding a designer and like a typesetter and getting the ISBN numbers, all that stuff that I hadn't really thought about. It was so I'm grateful to you for all of that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, and I say this all the time, but publishing, it's a team sport. It's one
Mhm.
of those things that even if you're self-publishing, having a good team around you is critical because otherwise it's just not going to be what you want it to be. And that means that readers might also not want it. So I think yours came out really, really good, and I'm excited about it. And
Yeah.
so I'm gonna put your cover back up for just a moment here so folks can see it again. There it is. So if you would like to purchase this, you can get it wherever you buy books. So obviously, there's our lovely friend Amazon, who still corners the market on book sales. So it's obviously available on Amazon. There's paper version, there's ebook. You kind of go out and get it in whatever format. We're big fans of bookshop.org, so certainly check out bookshop.org. It's a great of online bookstore that help support other local bookstores. So that's my personal preference. But if you want Barnes and Noble, go for it. Wherever you want to go buy the book, go ahead and do so. And then Gary, your information, let me put it back up, is on the bottom of the screen. So if they would like to go to your website, they can do so at the bottom, which looks like it is garyholmes76.wordpress.com. Is there any other way that you would prefer folks to contact you?
Well, you can just send me an email directly at garyholmes76@gmail.com.
Perfect.
That would probably be the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so get the book, read the book, leave a review for the book. That is the order of operations. Leave a review. Reviews are so important in this process, so please
That's
do that.
right. And yeah, 5 stars, please.
Yes. Yes. Well,
If you
thank you.
if you don't like the book, forget we said anything.
Yeah, just don't leave a review at all. Um, it's actually helpful to have like at least like one 4-star review because then it doesn't look like
All right, all right,
you've paid
okay,
everybody. So you can leave a 4-star. That'll be our compromise.
okay, all right. That sounds great.
Uh, thank you so much today for this. This was a good conversation. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Jen. It was really good talking to you.